Welcome aboard all. This week we speak to Michael Groves from Dwarvin Enterprises. We talk all things about his fibre optic layout lighting, which requires very little wiring. So he's also offering a 10% off deal people who watch this channel, or sorry, this episode. So you'll need to watch to the end to get the code word for that. For those who don't know me, I'm Dazzy J from Model Techniques. Our YouTube channel produces interviews, a few how-to videos, showcasing modelers from all around the world. So if you know of someone who may fit the bill, link below, reach out and email me, and we'll see if we get them on the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming content. Also, a big shout out to our superfan Patreons for the channel. So if you wish to help me along with my quest in the channel, every little bit counts. So without further ado, let's get started. And a little public service announcement here. Make sure you vote 1 for Gordy Robinson in the upcoming NMRA elections. I believe personally he has brought this hobby into the 21st century with such initiatives as the NMRA X, virtual clinics and the like. So make sure you vote for Gordy. Welcome aboard, Michael Groves from Dwarvin Enterprises. So thanks for coming and chatting with me on Model Techniques today.
You're most welcome. Glad to be with you, Dazzy.
That's great. That's great. Now, Michael, you can be found on I'll put all the links to all these below, by the way. So your website is www.dwarvin.com. That's DWARVIN. And also at Facebook, you can be Dwarvin ENT. And then your email to be contacted on is michael@dwarvin.com. As I said, all the links below. So welcome aboard. As I said, Michael, you're an expat of Australia from 40 odd years ago. As we talked about before, you don't have the American accent yet, but you are working on it. That's what you're saying. So
yep.
Now, I always like to get to know people regarding their history in our hobby. So how about we'll start there today. So tell us about your introduction into the hobby.
Yeah, well, it started when I was about 11 years old, and started when I was actually living in England. At about age 13, we moved to Australia, and that's where I got more interested in, well, I went to school and I went to, played a lot of music and did a lot of trumpet and started studying. And of course, all the train stuff went to the birds until my wife brought my son and I, he was 7 at the time, a train set, an HO train layout. And she said, basically, look, you're not playing with your son enough. Here, go and play. So that really was the beginning of my second time of getting into working on trains. And basically, it's never stopped since then. Dazzy, it's been a great hobby.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I love getting in there. My son and my daughter both like getting out into the layout room with me and having a tinker in some shape or form. So sometimes my wife, I think she might wish that I didn't get into trains, but, it keeps me out of her hair as well. So when she can pursue her hobby, so to speak. So sort of what are your influences in the hobby right now, Michael?
Well, the influences mainly have been this whole area of lighting. What happened was, I'll just give you a thumbnail sketch. Actually, I've got a bit of a presentation which I could use, which will be sort of describe it a bit more. Great. All right. Well, I just thought I'd sort of give you a bit of a heads up as to how I got into this whole business of lighting using fiber optics. I've already briefly described my history, where I started at age 11 and stopped promptly at age 13. How my son at age 7, because of the train set given to him by my wife, started again. But at age 55, I eventually sawed my set into parts because we moved from New Jersey to Pennsylvania. And here's a bit of a slide showing you what it looks like on the driveway. And as you can probably see, I used a sawzall. I couldn't find a machete anywhere, so I just used a sawzall to cut my train set up. And that's pretty brutal, actually. But there's my son. He'd done a lot of the work on it. The trestles are all hand-laid and a lot of hand-laid track, which was really fun putting that together. So that was the first time it saw the light of day, you might say. But then we moved to Pennsylvania, as I say, and one of the things that happened was all of my wires had labels on them. But after a couple of years, the labels fell off. I didn't know what wires go where. So I started looking around. I thought, okay, I really want to put some more lighting back into this train layout. So I went to something like Evans Designs and I looked at their stuff and I went, cool, look at that, really nice stuff. But then I looked at all the wires and I went, oh no, I've already got that headache. Not going down that path. All the soldering and so on. So I decided, yeah, let's move on from there. And, this is the real problem that everybody ends up with, right? A spaghetti problem. And in fact, I was at a train show and I was met with this bloke, Rick Wilkins. It was back in 2019. He said, look at this nice board at the front. But he said, take a look at that. So that's the back of it.
Wow.
I went, oh my gosh, that's just so typical. So somebody said to me, well, don't let this happen to you. And that was really sort of what got me thinking about how am I going to do some lighting? So I went over to Woodland Scenics and I saw their great stuff. I mean, this really beautiful stuff, LED stuff, and they took away all of the wiring issues with their sort of just plug system. But then I started looking at, wow, it's a lot of components in there, quite a lot of cost. And I'm not sure I'm ready to get into that. I really like to play with things a little bit more. Nice system, but I decided, okay, I'm not going to probably go down that path. So I thought, well, how about fiber optics? So I asked somebody, what do you think about that? And they said, well, Michael, people have tried that. It just doesn't work. But I thought, but it's no wiring, be easy to install, but how are you going to power it? So, well, I'm a background as a physicist. And as a physicist, you don't tell a physicist it can't be done. He ends up building something that, would amuse you or amaze you. So anyway, so what I did was this was my little jerry-rigged system that I put together. So you can see some optical fibers there. There's a heat shrink piece of tubing. There's some LEDs there, or an LED with a lens. And this, by the way, is an LED out of a car, so it's really intense.
Yeah.
So it needs a big heat sink at the back and a fan at the back and a small power supply. And for a couple of years, I was very happy doing this. I just had so I put my lighting on and it was great fun. But then something happened. At age 65, my grandson, who was then age 13, was doing some electronics with me. And I realized, hey, this little chap, he's got some real nous. He's going to probably go to university or something like that. And here in the US, it costs a heck of a lot to go.
Yeah.
So I said to him, why don't we start a company? What do we think about that? So this is what we thought. We thought, well, why don't we put together a system where you just take something which we've now called a lamplighter, put fibers up into the house, take a fiber from a lamp to stick it in, and you're not dealing with any wiring. Sure. So that was the initial concept. So that was it. That's what we actually produced. The name Dwarvin, now that's a weirdo name, but you see, my grandson's a weirdo because he loves Tolkien. He's read all of Tolkien's books, and Dwarvin is a great name that came up out of the Tolkien sort of trilogy work. So that's what we put in. And that's how we got into calling it Dwarvin, the company. And then we had to think of a name for the box, and we called it, well, it's a lamplighter, lighting lamps. So there we go. That's how we got into it. But basically, as you looked at that just plug system from Woodland Scenics, with all its components, really what we've got is a 2-component system. It's got a lamplighter, and then it's got fiber. And if that's just want to light buildings, that's all you need. Of course, you've got to make sure your drill is going to be properly socially distanced and so on. But anyway, have some fun. If you want some lamps with it, you just add lamps to it. If you want to make it into all, buildings and lamps on the roads, it's basically just a 3-component system. You don't need all the other bits and pieces. And so what was interesting, Dazzy, as we got to talk about this with potential customers, they said, oh, I could now use my imagination because I can just put things where I want them, how I want them, and not have to worry about all these bits and pieces. So there's David, who's our second grandson, and he makes all of our lamplighter boxes. So he's one of our dwarves, as we call him. He's a dwarf. He's not actually, he's over 6 foot, but there we go, we're over 2 meters in Australia. Yeah. And his dad's 6'6", so you can expect him to be pretty tall when he grows up. Anyway, great having grandchildren work with you. But we have some fun. Here's an older box that we made initially, and all I did was I took a fiber and I just nicked it along the way, And then I just added a couple of drops of paint, red, green, red, green, red, green. And guess what I got? I got Christmas lights.
Christmas lights.
That's what I like about this sort of technology. You can just start to play and have fun with it.
Sure.
In fact, everybody likes an English pub, right? And there's my English pub. My wife called it the Wet Whistle. By the way, I make wine and we call it the Wet Whistle Winery, but that's another story. We're not going to go down there.
No. Okay.
But you can see all the lights on there. Now there's 60 lights on that. Can you imagine how long it would take you if you wired all of those lights up? Instead, I just stuck some fibre up there and just nicked it and painted it. And
so, how many strands
would say?
How many strands of fibre have gone into your pub there?
Just on the outside, just two.
Two. Okay.
So you have one coming up a pipe on the right-hand side near that Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
And on the extreme left, there's another pipe coming up, basically a downspout.
Yeah.
And then I just ran the fibre across. So just two fibres and one with a nice a V bend in it. Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, then there's lights inside, but those are all just done with fibres. And there's lights even under the umbrellas. So you can have, a night scene and enjoy a beer and, by the river and so on.
Sure.
So,
are you finding,
good fun.
Michael, are you finding sort of customers that are using their current lamppost, so to speak? And so if we're going for the older one, it might have been incandescent globe, which we all know produces a lot of heat.
Right.
And they blow quite regularly. So you're finding customers are still using the lamppost and being able to thread the fibre optic up through the gooseneck or something similar, or to retrofit?
Yeah, actually the gooseneck doesn't work, but the straight ups certainly do. So I've got a lot of O-gauge people who just rip the top off their lamps and pull the wires out because they've dirty great big holes in those, and then just stick a fibre up.
Sure.
And I've got a couple of HO guys who've done that. N scale's a different story.
Yeah.
It's a little bit too narrow for that. But
Sure.
But the HO guys, so quite a few of them have done that. Yeah, which is fun, really.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
So
go on.
No, you go. You're on to the next slide.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. So what I've really discovered about this was, it adds a tremendous amount of realism, but I could actually add light in seconds. I had a customer the other day who said, it took him 2 days to do a whole load of wiring. And he said, he found our system, he pulled it all out, and he said, literally within an hour, he'd done the whole system again. And that was it. And now he could have coffee. So I think that's a huge, huge advantage. So of course, no wiring. I mean, that's really what it's about.
Sure.
But other things are, you mentioned the heat, as at the top of a light, the old incandescents.
Yeah.
And even with LEDs, those can get quite warm. With the fibre, there's no heat at the end at all.
Sure.
So you can do whatever you like with it. And I think it's a pretty cost-effective solution because you can get a lot of fibres into one of those boxes.
Sure.
And I mentioned before, it tremendously allows you for creativity. You can do whatever you want, wherever you want with it. And so in fact, I'll just show you right at the end some other creativity that I just discovered. So I think really it's sort of the next generation of lighting. But we just really discovered it. It was sort of really by need, and it's really just taking off.
Sure.
So I'll just show you a couple of pictures. So this one was by Paul McCarty. He did this article in Model Railroader, January 2021. And that's part of his layout. There's some those are all N-scale lights. And one of the things I love is this guy here, or bloke, reading a newspaper under one of the street lights outside the town hall. One of his challenges, all of his buildings are solid. So he couldn't put any lighting inside. So he had to light them basically, with basically a spotlight type approach.
Sure.
And then this looks like a Thomas Kincaid type of painting. He actually is using a moon glow along the back, using, again, fibre. And those lights. So really very, very nice effects. I was kind of impressed with what he'd been able to do with it. Another end scaler, he put together this beautiful little pond with a couple of lights around it. And then he knocked my socks off by doing the following. He took an old neon sign and he put fibre through it, and he scraped the side of the fibre so that it would actually glow out the side. And there he's got his neon lights at the top of his cinema. So
Wow.
not bad. I mean,
So how did
I've
he?
not done that.
No.
Go on.
How did he scrape? He just ran a X-Acto blade across it to.
Yeah, that's exactly what he did. But he had to grade it so that otherwise you'd have all the light escape at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay.
So he just played with it, and he must have been very patient with that.
Yeah.
But all of that's completely just lit with the fibre system. And
Yeah.
I must say, I wish I had time to play like that. That's great.
Yeah.
Great
It's
fun.
lovely, isn't it? Just explain to sort of people
Go on.
maybe quickly how the fibre works, because obviously the light comes in one end of the fibre and comes out the other end. So when you're explaining about nicking it, it's obviously allowing the light to escape along the length of the piece of fibre. That's technically what you're saying?
Technically, Dazzy, that's exactly right. Yes. So the real trick with fiber optics is to have a very, very highly intense, focused light beam, and that's what the Lamplighter provides.
Yeah.
And once the light gets into the fiber, because of the difference in optical density between the fiber and the air surrounding it, the light actually stays in the fiber. So then it will go around bends as well, because it just bounces back and forward along the fiber, bouncing off its walls. And as you say, Dazzy, it's only when you nick it, you damage the surface,
Yeah.
and a small amount of light can escape, giving you these pinpoints of light.
Yeah.
It's great.
Lovely. So
So
optic fibres I have used before, nothing to this extreme, but here in Australia, when we do some marker lights and similar, we've used old-fashioned LEDs, where you'll cut a hole
right.
into it and you'll fashion very similar to this. Obviously, the intensity of the light's not there, but obviously we get the nice, say, red LED right at the end where we want it, and it's just a lovely little beam. So it's a very similar approach, but obviously this is worlds ahead in regards to the technology side of things.
No, it's very, very similar. So yes, I find people asking me all sorts of questions of different approaches. I think you can take many different. I mean, here's a crazy one. Here's this lady. She's put it on her desktop, and this is one of her layouts. It's obviously N scale, but pretty good on that. There's another of just person who just he wanted to really get some light through the top of that building, because there was a lot of structure up in that sort of penthouse. So that's what he did.
Sure.
So now that's part of my layout, and I've got a sort of a river scene there with lights along it. In fact, the camera doesn't really show it, but I've actually painted the end of the fibers there to give the street lamps a little bit of an orange glow, so it's a bit more romantic.
Yeah, lovely.
But
More of a warm,
but also
warmer
put some
light.
street lights into the cars. That was kind of, again, fairly straightforward. But to show you somebody who did a lovely job on that, there's this guy, Dan Umbach, and you can see that his bus and so on the right-hand side. You can really see the dazzle at night, and it just adds a lot of color, lots of color.
Yeah, that's lovely, lovely. So now another sort of pro I can see, and I think it was on your website that I sort of didn't sort of gleam on me. Obviously, when we're running a lot of lighting units around a layout, and we're looking at occupancy detection, if you're into that type of thing as well, which causes interference, I suppose. Obviously, this is one way that we're sort of minimising the electromagnetic interference. I think you used on your website, which I can see another massive pro for this system.
Right. Yep. There is no electrical interference, and in fact, if you have a damp basement, which many people do, it's not going to interfere with your lighting. It will interfere with the running of your trains, but it won't interfere with your lighting at all. Or we're even looking at people putting them out in their garden systems. Once again, don't have to worry about the weather.
Yeah, sure.
Because the fiber's pretty inert. So that's a great question. Great question. I just thought I'd show you one of these. This is a narrow gauge guy near us.
Judy, yeah.
Judy, yeah. He came to me and he saw what I'd done, and he took some stuff back, and within an hour he sent me these pictures. And I went, crazy guy, what are you up to? And he said, look, I've not done any lighting, and I do all this diorama stuff for people and build layouts for people. And he said, he quite honestly said, hey, this is the best thing that's happened at least in the narrow gauge world for at least the last 10 years. He said, it's simple, it's great. I love the guy, just there looking in his rubbish bin about to throw something in. And yeah, there it is. But I got to introduce you to my youngest one, and that's Benjamin. He's the youngest of the dwarves, and he makes all of our, he's the youngest. He makes all of our street lamps. So there he is making the swan necks, or the goose necks, as might be called, down in our basement. So we've now got 3 grandchildren working on this. So it's really become a very, very nice family affair.
Yeah, that's lovely.
And that's Austin, who started with me, and he's now at university. But I was in Australia, and he showed me this picture, and he said, "What do you think of this, Grandad?" And I went, "What have you done?" Because in our area, there's a bridge called Trenton Makes, the World Takes.
Yeah.
And he put that together, and I said, "How on earth did you do that?" Well, he actually did it just by cutting into fibre. So he put a whole string of fibres, painted them black, and then he cut into them, just like I did with the lighting for the pub.
Yeah.
And he made some signage, and there it was on an N-Track show that was run a couple of years ago in Philadelphia. So he's turning out to be quite the engineer, which is great fun. I'll just show you quickly. So it's this is what our products are. I'll show you a bit more detail in a bit. 2 different Lamplighters. One's the smallest, then the big brother, Lamplighter 2, and a 2S. 2S is just twice as bright as the Lamplighter 2.
Right, okay.
And then we've got different lamps. Oddly enough, the industrial building lamps, I went to a show with those, and within 4 hours we were sold out, and I didn't realize that's going to be our biggest seller. Absolutely. Yep. Has been pretty big. And in a moment, I'll talk a bit more about our animation unit. That's the newest bit that we've got. So everything we talked about before this, so let's go back for a moment. This is what I call illumination. So we're illuminating things. We've got to have enough intensity that you can actually see something with the light. Whereas when you go to an animation, you don't need to have nearly as high intensity. And so we're actually purchasing this through a company called Model Train Technologies. They actually developed this for us. And you actually just put, so it has LEDs in there, and we just then plug the fibers in to it through those fiber pins that you see on the right-hand side.
Okay.
So that's got us into the animation area. And basically a very simple approach is this fully integrated railroad crossing, where you just take detectors, put in the lamps into the box, a bell, it all integrates in, and basically it really makes a system come alive.
Sure.
And so that's fairly straightforward. In fact, I'll show you a brief video of it, and you'll really get a sense of that. Any questions before I do that?
No, not at all. Keep going.
At the center of the fully integrated railroad crossing system is, of course, the Lamplighter flasher unit. To that can be attached the railroad crossings, which come with fibers attached already, and they just plug into the light outputs of the flasher unit. And then, of course, there are detectors. We have side-on detectors, and these are housed in what look like electrical boxes. We have 2 different sizes of those, easily mounted beside the railroad line. And then we have vertical detectors as well. Those get mounted underneath the rail track itself. And then these get connected through power from the Lamplighter flasher unit, as you can see in the diagram, and their outputs are connected to the input trigger of the Lamplighter flasher unit. And the only other component you're going to need is a crossing bell. And the crossing bell will just add vibrancy to your whole setup. If you don't want to do any wiring, you just add the terminal blocks, which can be used both for the voltage output from the flash unit as well as for connecting the triggers in, and that way you don't have to do any wiring at all. So that really is the system, and you can see it here. All other components are just laid out for you. So when you go to order, just simply select how many detectors you need, how many railroad crossings you need. And if you're going to use a double track system, as you see here, then I'd recommend, of course, using 4 detectors. And you can mix and match vertical detectors and side-on detectors. Enjoy. Bye for now.
I could see the beauty of the railway crossing system is that because it's self-contained unit within itself. So if someone then they don't have to worry about if they've already got their their detection units down for their track, which is obviously another way of detecting whether there's something to come up to a grade crossing. This can be retrofitted after the fact, and it's no cutting a track and very little wiring, as you've pointed out.
So I'm just going to show one rather fun thing that I did with some. So there's my night, one of my scenes just behind me actually at night. Sure. And what I did was somebody asked me, could you actually put fireworks together for it?
Wow. So how have you achieved that?
So that's a great question. So what I did with that, I just put some fibers in to a board, and then just I created a Lamplighter that had 3 outputs and a microprocessor in it, and then we just fired them off in a sequence. Sure. With a decay, and it allowed us to create a firework effect. And then I just added the sound through an MP3 player. Yeah, and that gave us, it was rather fun.
That's phenomenal. I've never seen fireworks on a model train before.
No. Well, it was one of my customers who wanted it, and I made it for him. He loves it, and so I said, well, I might as well put it on mine. What the heck? One of the newest things that I've just found that's really interesting to me is this. That we've actually now just added a remote control to the Lamplighter, and right. It actually just plugs straight into it, and you can turn the Lamplighters on and off. You can group them together. You can actually get them to flash. You can do whatever you want with them based upon this sort of a controller. So yeah, that's been a nice surprise, and we're just about to release that.
Yeah, lovely.
But
have you had any customers that are using Arduino or similar with your lighting units?
Not yet, no. But I think that's a very logical.
They're a 12-volt input, aren't they?
Our Lamplighter is a 6 volts input.
6 volts.
So actually it worked. So what we had in that fireworks display was actually what's called a tweenie, and it's basically a mini Arduino.
Right. Okay.
So we bought an Arduino, programmed it on that. In fact, David did that, and then we put it into this little tweenie, Twinkie or whatever it's called, and I put that inside. So basically runs off 5-6 volts.
Yeah, lovely. I could see Arduino definitely being used at that type of voltage, and inputting with some relays, so you can actually control that via the microprocessor, to setting up different scenes of dusk and dawn and the like.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. It's a great way to go. I think we haven't gone down that road yet, but I'm sure some of our customers will very, very soon.
I might have a look at that myself.
Hey, there you go, Dazzy. That's great.
Yeah. All right, Michael. So yeah, you've got some of the units to show us what they look like.
Yes. So let me do that, because I think you asked the question of what do the detectors look like.
Sure. Okay.
The little detector is something, it's quite small, as you can see in my hand. But I think, if that's just sticking up beside a railroad, that's a bit obvious. So what we did was we 3D printed up this little housing, which from the back just makes it look like an electrical box.
Yeah, sure.
But it goes over the top, and of course I can't put it in when I'm, yes. So it just sort of sits on the detector. So this part of the detector is underneath, and this is on top. And of course it can see out of the front. So, and that can detect just across one rail. We're actually going to come out with one fairly shortly that will cover not just one rail, but 2 rails. Right. So a little bit more sophisticated.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
So those are the detectors. And to show you something that really is quite big, if you're really into O gauge, I don't know if you can see that easily enough.
Yep,
Probably
can
should
see
take
that
that
fine.
out of it. Yeah, okay. So that's our O gauge railroad crossing. So it's a whopping, great big thing. It's this, you know, at least 6 inches high.
Yeah.
So we've got them that size, and then we also have them down in the
Smaller
end
end
scale
scales.
size.
Yeah, lovely.
which is almost spider size.
And they're all
So
handmade by your team. Is that right?
they're all made by the boys.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. Yep. It's
That's
all
a
made
that's a fantastic
in-house.
that's a fantastic little story, I think, regarding keeping the family together, teaches them some good life skills, I suppose, and they're earning money towards their education, as you first point out. I think that's fantastic. Hats off to Granddad.
Right. Well, it's been fun. It was not expected, but it's sort of
No.
grown from that. I'll tell
So
you one of the other
sorry, go on. No, you're gone.
one of the fun areas too, Dazzy, is 3D printing. So I'm just looking for, sorry, hold a moment. Yes. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So I've just pulled up one of our carriage lamps that's an O scale. And this really is quite a nice size. So I'll just pull it out of its packaging. Just to give you some idea, I went to a model railroad, actually it was the National Model Railroad Association back in 2018. And this man was talking up the storm about doing 3D printing. And I thought, interesting. But it just took 6 months. And Austin said to me, can we buy a 3D printer? And I said, yes, you can buy a 3D printer if you know how to design things. So he bought a design program. 2 days later, he showed me some designs. And there we go.
There we go.
So those are 3D printed stems.
Yeah.
That glass is 3D printed, and so is the top.
Yeah, lovely.
And so all we do is we just put the fibers into those. There's a bit of work to be able to make sure they all match up properly, but yes. And so actually my wife makes all of our lamps that are designed from the 3Ds printed parts, but it's really our grandchildren that do all the design work for us.
Yeah, that's lovely. I've just recently gone into 3D printing myself. I've yet to sort of learn the CAD side of things. I've been lucky enough to virtually meet a gentleman who lives in Poland, of all places, and I'm helping him because predominantly I'm into German railways, Australian in German railways, but that's another story for another day. And yeah, he's been, I've literally printed some off this morning, and I'm going to, they've been all cured, and I've just put them together. But I'm using very, very small LED, so I'm wondering if I can actually somehow get your fibre optics down them.
Yes, well, the diameters, there's all sorts of diameters. Our smallest is 0.5 millimeter. Yeah. Next is 0.75. Then we have 1 millimeter, then 1.5, and then 2 millimeter.
Sure.
So on a job like this, for example, that for O gauge, we're using a 1.5 millimeter.
Yeah.
For everything we make for the HO, it's 1 millimeter. And then for the N, we go down to 0.75.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Are you using an FDM printer?
No, I'm using a resin printer.
Oh, really? Already? That's a big leap.
So the prices are so cheap these days. I think I paid $400 Australian, which is still a fair whack of change. But considering the lights that I'm making, unfortunately they're outside drying right now, so I'd show you one. They sort of come in. They've got sort of a filigree sort of mask to them, and they sort of, it's like a dual one, sort of a dual lamp that a German company, Brauer, make a little bit of a similar one, but I've added my own spin to it.
Lovely.
And
lovely.
Yeah, so, but mind you, they're only costing me a pittance to print, but $35 if I was to buy one. So, go figure.
Yeah. So, no, these are. It does cut the cost considerably. The challenge, though, is the amount of scrap sometimes, and we actually get most of ours made commercially from another company that really has some high-tech stuff. I mean,
Sure.
his machines cost $7,000 to
Yeah,
$10,000
yeah, yeah.
each. And we need that to be able to get the reliable. What I wanted was very, very fine detail.
Yeah.
And so they really look very high quality, and we couldn't make that sort of thing in
No,
house.
fair enough. Yeah,
So
that's fine.
yeah,
That's fine.
it's
Oh, that's
great.
fantastic. That's fantastic. So we might talk about some of your products in a little more detail.
Right.
So we'll bring up your website. Might be the easiest. So
Okay, that's great.
So obviously we talked about the website before, Dwarvin.com. So you can probably see that on the screen there. So now, good little read here is where I was in a news agency here in Adelaide just yesterday, and obviously being half a world away, where that is the latest model railroadie in this country, and I just happened to be thumbed through it, and I've gone, there's a whole article about it. So hence why the message last night, but obviously it's, you're probably already up to February's editions where you are in your part of the world, so worth a good little read, that's for sure. So we might just talk about briefly the products. So the Lamplighter comes in 2 different starter sets. So
Right.
we might just talk briefly about what's the difference between the two of them.
Great. Okay. Yes. So I've got some in my hand, obviously, easy to put my hands on them. So we've got the Lamplighter 1. That was our initial one. That so all it is very straightforward. Power goes in one end, 5 volts or 6 volts into this end, and then out of the other end, and I don't have it on at the moment, is really just a bezel here, which allows you to be able to put the fibers in. And in fact, it clamps down on the fiber. So if you put 1 in, it'll fall out. But if you put, say, 3 in, it's going to stay in there. And the more you put in there, the more it just opens up.
Sure.
So that's the Lamplighter 1. Your typical LED, it's got an LED in there. Typical LEDs run at about 10 to 20 milliamps. This is running at 800.
Wow.
So it's a little bit of a different animal altogether. Yeah. And then we move from there to the Lamplighter 2. And the Lamplighter 2 is big brother. It's literally twice the size of the Lamplighter 1 in terms of the amount of power that can go into it and the number of fibers. So it really was, initially I designed it I thought for the O gauge guys, thinking the Lamplighter 1 would do fine for everybody else.
Yeah.
And very quickly, we've been selling mainly these to end scalers.
Right.
Because they can just put one of these in and light absolutely everything on their layout.
Yeah, if I was definitely going to go down that track, I'd definitely look at the starter kit too, purely because you could light substantial city in HO scale on my layout anyway.
Yes. So this comes, as either the box or, as you talked about, as a starter kit. And what we do is we wrap our fibers up in sort of basically 30-foot lengths. And so you can this comes with 2 sets of 30-foot of fiber.
Right.
So that's really quite attractive. So, just gets you going. It's no good just having the box. You need some fiber.
Yeah.
So add the fiber in, and basically you're ready to go. You can light a whole load of buildings using that. In fact, you could light up to, let's see, on an HO scale, about 25 buildings using that. N scale, you're up to about 60 buildings.
Yeah, wow. That's phenomenal. So obviously you can buy more fibre optic, just the actual cable, so to speak, or the optics, I should say, not cable, separately. Because obviously, depending on where you position the Lamplighter itself, is depending on how much of a run of optics that you're using. Right.
Yep. So typically I recommend running at about 3 to 4 feet from wherever the Lamplighter is.
Yeah, sure.
So that gives you about an 8-foot spread, 6 to 8 foot spread. So what you saw on mine with that night scene, that's basically a 6-foot spread, and I've got my Lamplighters right in the middle of that. And I've got oodles of lamps on mine because that's my test bed.
Right. Sure.
That's where I experiment with everything. So So, and the nice thing is you can add, you know, let's say you want to light a building in HO, well, you can use a 1.5mm fibre, but the street lamps are going to be 1mm. And let's say you just wanted to stick some fibres up into a tree to give you some fairy lights in a tree. Well, they're probably going to be 0.5mm.
Right.
But they all go into the same box.
Yeah, okay.
No need for new attachments.
Yeah, that's such a simple design. When I started looking into this, Michael, it was just like, so you just stick the fibre in the side. I'm thinking, why? You know, obviously you've come up with this lovely idea out of pulling your layout down. So, you know, it's a pinch point for yourself, so to speak, and you've come up with this lovely design. So now, I know how you do it, but if you can tell the viewers out there, because obviously with LEDs, we'll liken it back to LED. If you want to play with the intensity of the light, you might just change the value of the resistor or similar, or potentiometer if that's what you're going into. How do you change the intensity of the LED? Oh, sorry, the intensity of the optic light.
All right. Well, there's two ways now to do it, but the most simple way is when you put the fibre in, it goes in about 3 inches. You can actually pull the fibre out slightly and it dims the light. So it's very manual. You can just you can have a whole bunch of fibres and say, oh, I want that one a little bit dimmer, and just pull that one out a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you've got some dimness. Now, I have to tell you a funny story. In my first show, the NMRA show I went to in 2018 in St. Louis, a customer asked, or potential customer asked me, oh, how do you dim them? I said, oh, you can't. I was so dumb. I was just learning the system, right? So, Of course, yeah. So I went home and then just went, oh, what a clown. But the other way to do it is with this little controller now, RF, these actually have dimming on them. So, but obviously you're going to dim every fibre.
Everything. Yeah, sure.
But you could do a nice dawn, you know, to dusk sort of thing on using those. Yes. Great question.
Unbelievable. So dimming down. So we talked about other products that you're looking at selling. We touched on Arduino quickly. What future products? What are you looking at? What's in the pipeline?
Okay, so what's in the pipeline? We're sort of fairly saturated with the lights, but we do come up with customers are now asking us for more modern looking lights. So we're probably going to start looking at some of those and just adding some of those to it. A whole different area, which I haven't yet explored well, is the whole area of block detection. So for example, I don't know if you can see that easily, but there's a sort of basically a little light that would be down right next to the rail. And that little Lamplighter flasher unit now allows us to actually turn on signals based upon detection. So we actually can turn red or green very simply using those same infrared detectors.
Right.
And we would get the same, So you actually now can use that same box. So my next design is to actually build one that's a little bit taller, so that basically it's more at the height of the train driver.
Sure.
So these can be down right beside the rail, and so that's my newest design goal that I gave David. I said, David, I need you to design something up for me for that. So those I think could probably be our next wave. We'll be looking at block detection and putting stuff together there. Again, I'm always interested in whole systems, if possible, things that can make a lot of sense. And I'll tell you honestly, some of the other products are going to be what our customers recommend to us and say, this is what we'd like for you to do for us.
And I could definitely see you, if you're looking at block detection, getting into, please tell me if I've missed it on the website, but actually signals themselves, like.
Yes. Yep. So we haven't gone down that thinking yet, but I am sure we will be moving into that. Now, what you've got up on the screen right now are some of our billboards.
Yeah, they're lovely. They're gorgeous. Yep, that's why I wanted to touch on those quickly. So can you tell us about the billboards?
Yep. So the billboard's very straightforward. That's just 3 lamps. and we can provide you with a range of different colors, sorry, pictures. In fact, I've done some custom ones. A guy called me up and he said, "Hey, I've got a 1963 Camaro. Could you put a billboard together for me of that?" And well, he'd actually ordered quite a few thousands of dollars of stuff, and I said, "Sure, I'll do that for you."
Lovely.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see on my layout behind me, but right over there, where my finger's pointing, is a, in fact, let me just move that much. So I think you can see that.
Yep, I can. That's lovely.
So you can put them on the top of buildings, put them down beside the layout. So basically all you do is just drill 3 holes, very small, tiny holes.
Yeah.
Now I always have, the only problem with fibers, they're so small that when you drill the hole, you've got to make sure you know where you drill the hole.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is nice in a way, because it means if you make a mistake, it doesn't really matter. You'll never see it.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we just have a little alignment tool. Just put that down, drill the 3 holes, put the fibers down, put them in the box, and you've got yourself a billboard.
Yeah, lovely.
And it's not difficult for the customer even to make their own pieces if they wanted. They could easily print something up and just snap it on the front of that.
Is that the Camaro one you're speaking of?
Yep, well, that was, that's one of, actually it's a different, I got a different one for this chap. Yep. That wasn't quite the year he wanted, so.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right, but there it is. There's a Camaro.
Yeah, it's lovely. So obviously they come in the different scales there, which is nice as well.
Actually, at this stage, they're mainly in HO, but I do have a number of O gauge guys who've said, "I'll put it back up on a hill." That's really nice.
Yeah, okay.
You know, bit of distance.
Bit of force.
That'll work. Yep.
Michael, so thank you so much for coming along and chatting with me today. It's been a insightful sort of look into your little cottage company that you got there with your family. So thanks for taking time away from them, and obviously your lovely layout sitting behind you. That's been great. So I'll put all the links to everything below. You've got, I encourage people to go onto your website, because there's a whole lot of blog stuff, how things work, how to tweak things, and all sorts of different bits and bobs on that website. That's fantastic. So one thing I would like to cover just off at the end that we spoke about before, Michael and the team there have graciously offered a 10% off their final bill, I suppose, or invoice, for 2 weeks, I think we discussed, Michael, and I'll put all the actual dates of that below. So what you'll need to do is to go in there and you'll need to type in at checkout MRT 2021.
Right.
And yeah, as I said, thank you very much for offering that to the MRT viewers tonight. And thanks again for having a lovely chat.
You're welcome, Dazzy. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thanks for your questions, and have fun lighting your layout.
Definitely will. Thank you again.
Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook and Instagram at Motoraro Technique.